talk a bit about globalization, and we're going to talk about some tips and some trends that are tied to it. So just bear with me here. It is a little bit boring, but we just have a little bit longer in this day left, right? So first and foremost, in case you don't know this already, 75% of the online world today doesn't speak English. Let that soak in for a moment, right? A lot of folks, especially in the States, have a hard time understanding that stat. There are literally millions upon millions of people that are online, and only about 25% of them are English speaking. If you want to reach 50% of the world's online population, you have to translate into 5 languages. So if you're not translating, you're leaving a lot on the table, first and foremost. Just a show by hands, just to kind of bring you guys back into the conversation. How many of you actually translate your content today? For those of you who don't, you should feel really bad right now. No, just kidding. Okay, so let's continue then. Globalization and digital transformation is often oversimplified. Those of you who have been in the Adobe ecosystem for a couple of years may have already seen this graphic. It's one of my favorite representations of how oversimplified all of this is. So it's kind of like this drawing, right? You get to step 1, you put a couple of circles in, throw in a couple of lines, you put in that hair, and boom, done horse. And so the comparison to going through a digital transformation is that everyone kind of tells you that, hey, there's this thing you do, you install AM, and then you update your site, and boom, you're done. There's a lot of detail that's missed in there. So we recently hosted with Adobe a webcast with 3 of our shared customers, Western Digital, Eaton, and I'm going to try to see if I have the screen here. One second. There we go. Western Digital, Lufthansa, Eaton, and Honeywell. And the whole idea behind having this webcast was to talk through their experiences with digital transformation. So I've taken out from that presentation a couple of the key learnings about their experiences because, frankly, that's all we care about anyway is what other people are going through. You don't need to hear another sales pitch from anybody. So that said, I am going to do my little plug just to explain who we are, give you a little bit more context. So our business, what we offer is what's referred to as a translation management system. That's a platform that basically allows you to crowdsource how you translate your content. And you can have in that system a number of different workflows. Machine translation, you can have AI, human translation, you can have vendors bid on work. You can track all of it in this platform. For us, that platform is named GlobalLink. In case you've never heard of us, we're an $800 million firm. We're the largest company in our industry by quite a large amount. And this platform is the most adopted platform in the industry, translation management system. So 5,000 today companies worldwide use this technology to help them scale how they go global. Typically, this is an enterprise issue. I'm going to be honest. You might see it in SMB. It's not usually a small business challenge because a lot of small businesses, especially in the States, don't translate. They're still trying to figure out their own business before they figure out going global. So this is just a bit about our company. And then the technology in particular, what it does is it hooks into all of the different places where you're creating content. And so it could be AM, could be Marketo, could be Magento, could be a slew of other technologies. And what it does then is it allows you to have all of the workflow that might be necessary for translating in one place. The hardest thing for most companies to deal with when it comes to translation is scaling it. Places where you fall down in scaling translation tend to be around the volume of content you have to translate. And usually you have to pay all those translators by the word. So what the system allows you to do is actually store and reuse sentences and define preferred terminology. This way you can actually cut the volume of what you're translating by 50, 60%. That decreases your costs and allows you to enter more markets. So this is how the platform works at its core. Another place where translation tends to not scale or where it chokes is if you have people in market who want to do review on the translation of the content, and you're trying to get live, and you just told them that they have 3 days to go through 100 pages of content, and they just gave you the middle finger. Usually the people that are doing review on the translation of content have day jobs. Whether they're an external provider that you're hiring to do the review for you, or internal, usually that internal person happens to be in marketing or happens to be in sales, happens to be in operations and speak the 2 languages, 3 languages that you might want to have review for. And so when you're giving them work to proofread, basically, just because they happen to speak the language, it's the last thing they want to deal with. The other thing is they may not know Adobe at all. And so logging into AEM to review some pages is dangerous because, frankly, they could break some stuff while they're in there. You don't want them in there to begin with. So we offer a review capability that allows them to click a button, see what that page looks like with full context, but in our system, and they get notifications. Another way to help scale the process. So that's the technology. Here are all the different systems that it hooks into, over 40 different platforms today, and more all the time. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go through. So again, here were the folks that were on this panel. And I'm going to be super quick here, I promise. One thing that was brought up by Koshi from Honeywell was that you should test and iterate and do this in small batches. Nothing says you have to translate your full website. Nothing says that you have to launch in a market with all 10 million of your products. Hell, that market may not even be able to purchase a lot of those products. So his whole point here was be nimble, do an MVP, go live with that, and test it. And then you can test out different things and different MVPs. You can test out artificial intelligence, which I'll talk a little bit about when I talk about trends in a minute. So this was, I thought, a great piece of advice, especially if you've done translation before, you get this concept. If you haven't, you don't know what you're getting into yet. And it's really time-consuming, costly, and complicated. Simplify that by limiting your scope. The next quote here from Vicky Key from Western Digital was basically that the lights are freaking me out right now. I don't know if that got anyone else. But basically, her whole point here was you should automate as much of it as you can. I mentioned before some of the things that the platform does. The idea is if you can take out copying and pasting, if you can take out exporting XML and emailing that to someone, if you can take out the steps of actually checking all of this all the time and put it into a dashboard where you can check the statuses and check to make sure that they're adhering to SLAs, the more that you can automate, the better. And for Western Digital, they saw a savings of 50% in their turnaround times through automation. So trying to automate as much of it as you can makes that whole process a lot more scalable. Michael Gernicke from Lufthansa, he basically was kind of expanding on automation and saying that in the end, you don't want to be pushing around a lot of files. What they use our platform for is it's integrated into Adobe. But what you might not know is that Lufthansa actually doesn't just translate content that's in Adobe. They have reservations content, they have signage, they have marketing that they do across the globe. So they use our platform both to push content in from Adobe, but also to upload files to us for campaigns that they're running, to make submission for email campaigns. They also have it hooked in with their PIM. There's a number of different parts of their ecosystem that they submit content from. So they use the platform to help them automate how they push out content to all of their translators. And by the way, we're just one of about a dozen different firms that they use for translation. We don't always get used when they're using our tech, but we do offer a wide array of services for translation for when folks need it. So again, keep automating as much as you can. And then the fourth and final tip, ultimately, was prepare for unexpected spikes. So this is a really interesting point. So if you have a situation where you're doing all of your translations with a controlled set of vendors, let's say you have 3 vendors, but suddenly you're doing a new site launch, or someone offers a new product and didn't tell you, and suddenly they want it on the website within hours, and they want a campaign around it. You need to have tools in place to allow you to basically flex. And so what they do is they use Global Link to allow them to have a translation set of contractors available at their whim. So the idea then is that they only use, 13, 16 different translators who handle all of their translations across, 27 different languages. And so when they have spikes where someone else in the business is wanting to run a new campaign, they use Global Link because they have other vendors in there that they can easily just push content to. So this allows them to flex to the business's requirements when someone in marketing or IT or maybe even the CEO comes along and says, hey, we need this content and we need it live now. A really common example is, this is very common in travel and tourism, and it's becoming more common, unfortunately, is in situations where there are emergencies that happen, whether they're natural emergencies or some other kind of emergency, and being able to push out messages quickly in 10, 12, 15 languages is critical, especially when you're a hotel, especially when you're an airline. So plan for those fringe cases, those spikes, and your life will be substantially easier. You're going to get a lot less grief. That was ultimately Patrick's comment, Patrick from Eaton. So again, Global Link, the idea is to do all of these things that they're suggesting, which is to automate as much as possible, to help you have a supply chain when you need it for translation, and ultimately help you scale how you're going global. Now, again, I mentioned we're the largest company in our industry, so I'm going to just take a moment and talk about some trends that we're observing. I think that these are things that you may even see in your own businesses. The first and foremost thing is AI. It's not just in AEM. It's everywhere, as I'm sure you guys are hearing. Every time you go to a freaking conference, they're talking about AI probably, so I apologize that I'm going to be that person. But in the end, what I think is important for you to know is that AI has reached the translations world, and it's reached it in a really interesting way. It's not just about machine translation. It's actually about programming engines to be able to communicate. And what's fascinating about it is I've seen them in our lab working on doing this, programming these engines. And it's like teaching a child how to communicate. It's fascinating. They put in sentences that have bits and pieces that have been programmed already, and when it doesn't know how to handle a sentence, it's kind of like a babbling baby. It repeats the phrases that it knows. And so it's new technology that, frankly, it's not really fully there yet. The machines can't really translate everything. But what you can do is you can program them with preferred terminology that you have, and then you can apply some human processes to help clean up and pull levers to make adjustments in how it's handling your language. So over time then, it becomes something that is more useful to you and your business. And so we've launched an AI practice through acquiring a company last year that started their own AI, and we've tucked it neatly into our stack to help our clients leverage AI to help them further reduce their costs by augmenting how much of the content is translated by humans. They're also using it, in some cases, to help them manage their supply chain. So they can look at if they have vendors that are overcharging them or if they're not adhering to SLAs. And so these are very interesting concepts that continue to help you add more efficiency into your process of translation. Another thing that I think is really fascinating right now is, so how many of you have heard of journey mapping? Put those hands high, guys. I can't see you. Okay, good. I'm glad most of you have heard of it. So with more of the consultancies talking about journey mapping, they're really talking about how you have that experience and then how your customer goes through the experiences that you're creating. But there's a fundamental part of journey mapping that I'm sure all of you have learned about by this point, which is the incorporation of the customer's feedback, that feedback loop, and providing customer support for them. And so we're seeing a lot of customers now that have localized their websites and have had localized websites for 10 years. They're in maybe 15 languages, but they only provide customer support in 2. And so we're seeing a lot of companies that are now saying, okay, we need our tickets and service now localized. We need our Zendesk interactions to be fully localized and available in 10 languages. And this is a big thing. The last part of that is chat, having chat available, that then we plug the AI that I mentioned earlier to you, we plug that into the chat to allow for a conversation to happen with a support and customer service rep who may not speak that language. So this is another trend that we're seeing, and it's growing. As an example for you, Adobe just announced their partnership, I think it was ServiceNow at Summit this year. I mean, when Adobe's making those big moves, it's because their customers are asking for it, and we're seeing it as well. Across our Adobe base, many, many customers are focused on customer support specifically. The last thing is, and this is an old thing, actually, video has been really kind of creeping in the background and growing and growing. And I heard someone say that content is king. I would argue that now video is king. And I'm saying this because every single one of our customers are creating more and more and more and more video, whether it's for training or it's for explaining a product or it's just their social engagement method. It's videos and forms of videos that are really the mass proliferation of content for us these days. And localizing video is actually quite costly because you have to rebuild the video and rebuild it in each language. So we've actually, to address this, we've launched a new offering that allows us to crowdsource video production. So we've created a virtual studio so that a translator can log in from their home and actually subtitle the content. It has the timings that are added in automatically. We've actually also plugged in our AI, so you can leverage the AI as a quick translation, and then you can go in and edit that content. This makes the production of video content in other languages substantially cheaper. We haven't stopped there. We've also actually put together kits for linguists to have their own recording studio at their home so that they can then do the voiceover that you're looking for in a high quality, but by dropping then the fees for the engineer and the studio time. And so these are just little things that allow for scaling video and doing this in a more consistent fashion. And again, this is a trend that we're seeing across all of our customers, is they're putting less and less content on their websites, and they're putting more and more content into video. So that's all I'll say. If there's more tips or tricks you want to learn more about, we have our user conference coming up in San Francisco in October. Please don't hesitate to contact me. We would love to have any of you there. And we'll have a number of customers speaking, and we'll be talking about roadmap of these technologies, and you'll also have a chance to see some demos as well. So thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.